Thank you all for coming and welcome to the fall meeting. As I mentioned at the beginning of the keynote, AGU is really excited to be part of this launch of the new Xprize. And this kind of support for basic research is really innovative and something that we've been watching for a long time. And we think that it's an important new model, and we think that its impact is going to be very substantial. And I think you heard that in some of the questions after the presentation. I should also note that my day job is as director of Scripps Institution of Oceanography, and so I certainly am very acutely aware of the lack of bathymetric mapping and imaging of the ocean and how important that knowledge could be to us in a lot of ways. And as an ocean researcher myself, it was like a present under the Christmas tree to see this announced. And I think that as you heard us talking about during the question and answers, all of us really feel that this has the opportunity to be a real game changer for ocean exploration. So to kick off today's press conference, I'd like to introduce you to our speakers if you weren't at the session and didn't see them there. Dr. Peter Diamandis, Chairman and CEO of the Xprize, Dr. Jyotika Virmani, Senior Director of Energy and Environment and the Shell Ocean Xprize lead, Dr. Paul Bunje, the Xprize Principal and Senior Scientist of Energy Environment, David Schweitz, Shell's Vice President of Geophysics for the Americas, and Dr. Richard Spinrad, Chief Scientist of NOAA. And I am going to go back down because I have to leave in a few minutes to go and give my own talk at AGU. So, Peter, I'm going to turn things over to you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you to AGU for your support and providing the venue for the announcement. To the members of the press, welcome everybody. My name is Peter Diamandis. I have the honor of serving as the CEO and Chairman of the Xprize Foundation. The Xprize was started back in 1994 when I had a chance to read The Spirit of St. Louis, Charles Lindbergh's book that he wrote about his journey across the Atlantic in 1927. And it turned out that that journey in 1927 was incentivized by a $25,000 prize. And during the era of prizes that were between the early 1900s and 1910, 20, 30, 40s, is actually the news media, many of the top newspapers that funded those prizes back then because they wanted to create heroic events that would create heroes and tell stories. And today, we launch these prizes really to try and incentivize teams around the world to do heroic things and to bring new technologies into existence. And so at the Xprize Foundation, we're based in Los Angeles, we are launching prizes in a wide range of areas in energy and the environment, in oceans and space, in health and life sciences, in global development and education. And this prize is actually the third in a series of ocean exploration prizes. The first was on ocean oil spill cleanup, the second on ocean health, and this third one in mapping the ocean floor. So we're very honored and pleased to have Shell and NOAA as our two sponsors. It's a $7 million Ocean Discovery Xprize, asking teams to map the ocean floor at a level of fidelity, resolution, depth that is orders of magnitude better than ever before. Really to help us understand what the other 95% of the ocean floor that's out there, what it is, because we've only mapped a fraction of our ocean floor. I like to say that we know more about the surface of Mars than we do our own oceans. So what I'd like to do is actually roll the video we have to give some more context and then open it to my colleagues again to provide answers to your questions.
We humans are natural explorers. We can't help ourselves. Whether it's new worlds across treacherous landscapes or planets and galaxies beyond our imagination, the unknown calls to us, and we are driven to discover what's out there. But in all of our centuries of exploring, we've barely scratched the surface of one of the most fascinating places in the universe, our own secrets of our planet, yet since the dawn of time, we've only explored 5% of it. Crushing pressures, extreme temperatures, and all-consuming darkness make exploration nearly impossible. The ocean remains the greatest mystery on Earth. What's going on down there? What discoveries await us? What new and fascinating forms of life will we find? The $7 million Shell Ocean Discovery Xprize is a global competition challenging teams to push the boundaries of existing ocean technologies and create safer, faster, and affordable ways of exploring the deep sea. This includes a $1 million bonus funded by NOAA for breakthroughs in chemical and biological sensors. By harnessing the power of autonomous underwater robotics, teams will illuminate the deep with high-resolution mapping and advanced imaging systems on a scale never seen before. The answers to some of humanity's oldest questions, or the cures to our most deadly diseases, could be waiting to be discovered. Imagine a future in which our ocean is healthy, valued, and understood. Be part of the discovery. Form a team or follow the competition online. The Shell Ocean Discovery Xprize. Getting to the bottom of our ocean. Find out more at oceandiscovery.xprize.org.
So with that, I'd like to open for any questions we have for our esteemed guests from Shell, from NOAA, and from the Xprize.
Yeah, and just a reminder that only reporters can ask questions, and please state your name and affiliation when asking a question. Are there any questions in the room from any reporters in the room? Please raise your hand.
Hi, yeah, it's Jonathan Amos from BBC News here. Can you give us just a little bit more detail about what you expect to see, I guess? What sort of solutions do you think will come forward? I mean, that's the whole point, I guess, is that people dream up their own ideas. But you know, knowing what you know, Peter, about what's out there, what do you think might come forward?
Well, let me ask my colleagues who are, I'm the space guy usually at the conference and not the oceans guy, but I will say that, I mean, there's something very important to be said here, which is what we're going to see is going to be more autonomous, it's going to be smaller, it's going to be cheaper, it's probably going to be swarm in nature. I mean, this is what we're seeing through, you know, the proliferation of cell phone technology, right? We're seeing robots now that are much more capable. So, you know, Richard, you're seeing a lot of technology in NOAA these days, and what do you expect, or what do you hope to see? I mean, what's being used now, and what would be a success? I know when I was launching the Ansari Xprize for spaceflight, Greg Marek and I created sort of a map of all the different ideas we expected, and every single one of those ideas, a team actually tried it, which was the great thing. You get sort of Darwinian evolution. You get all the ideas attempted, and you only have to fund the winner. It's the way all science is done, right? You only fund the winner.
Right, exactly. So if you think about the application side and what we cannot do right now, and I could think of any number of examples, the Malaysian Airlines downing a couple of years ago, Deepwater Horizon, all of those have required a capability for getting information about the ocean bottom pretty quickly in areas where we don't necessarily have it right now. And I also ought to point out that once mapped, that doesn't mean the ocean isn't changing. So the capability of rapidly acquiring large amounts of data about the ocean floor, what's on it, chemical and biological, as well as the geological and physical makeup, is really an extraordinary capability just outside of our reach right now. And so what I look at is, can the capabilities, the technologies that emerge from this prize ultimately get us to a point where we can do, in effect, real-time ocean floor characterization, rapid ocean floor characterization, and do it in an adaptive manner. We don't know where the next Malaysian Airlines crash will be. We don't know where we're going to have high-resolution mapping of the ocean for a particular application at any particular time. But knowing that downstream, years from now, several years from now, we could deploy some technological capability that has its roots in the participants and winners of this competition, is convincing that we will be in a place where we can do that same kind of rapid assessment. Think about if something like what I just described, happens on the dry part of the Earth. Our ability to go there, map what's going on, and get the information in a very short amount of time is really quite sophisticated. Having that same capability for the ocean bottom, regardless of where it is in the ocean, is the exciting stretch goal, if you will, for what's going to come out of this.
Go on.
Hi, Jonathan.
Hi.
I was going to add to that some of the technical ancillary pieces we might see come out of this are things like improvements in communication. We're challenging the teams to be autonomous, so no human intervention in the competition area. We're also part of the reason for having a data, an imaging piece to this is as a proxy for sensors. So how do these devices draw on power? So we may see innovations in how these vehicles and these systems are powered as well. So there are a number of other technical ancillary benefits that we may see come out of this competition.
Sorry, and as a follow-up, and actually, Peter, you may be able to answer this question. What is it that stops these technologies coming through currently? I mean, people write books and books about innovation, don't they? But why haven't the likes of, I don't know, Fugro Geoconsulting got this kit in their R&D lab now? What's stopping us pull through this technology to a level where it's out there?
Probably a lot of things, frankly. But whenever we launch a prize, one of the things we do is to look at what are all the barriers and impediments to that sort of innovation that exists now. And this one has a couple of fairly obvious ones in many respects. The first of which may sound trivial, but I think is relevant, which is the very fact that we have not explored. It's very hard to invest when there is no market because nobody has identified opportunities in markets that exist out there, right? I mean, it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy that the money won't go into it. The examples that you have that build autonomous on water vehicles and other things like that tend to be focused on rather smallish industries, candidly. Outside of oil and gas and defense, it's science and a little bit of search and rescue and the like. And so one of the things we want to do is incentivize novel players to identify opportunities to look at these. And then the other element to this, candidly, is that there's not a lot of opportunity for innovation. So we mentioned this, Jyotika mentioned this on stage, that the costs of exploration right now are tied in large part to the costs of large research vessels, crews, et cetera. That's not capitalizing on the innovation from other industries, be it autonomy and sensors from biomedicine or informatics. It's not capitalizing on the amount of robotics work that's happening in things like driverless vehicles and the like, or space exploration in other places. And so some of it's just that there's not been a galvanizing force to bring to bear a lot of new technologies on the marine and maritime space. And I think that's candidly one of the reasons exactly for an Xprize is we know those bits and pieces are out there, but there's never been really a market pull mechanism that was scalable enough for folks to come involved, and that's when a prize can really disrupt the existing incentives.
And let me just add another important idea here. We talk about sort of thinking out of the box a lot of times. We actually change the model and say we want you to think in a really small box. So when we put up our prizes, it's really important that the challenge we're asking people to do is extraordinarily hard, such that it's not just a small extrapolation of what exists. And when you do that, when you say, I want you to do this that's 10 times more with 10 times the less money and 10 times less time, what it forces teams to do is let go of the old ways of doing things. And it forces them to take very risky approaches, which the majority of which will fail. But if someone actually pulls it off within those constraint parameters, it really drives a fundamental breakthrough. And frankly, a lot of times in industries that are typically government funded or funded by large industries, the incentive to try crazy ideas, to try a fundamental breakthrough isn't there. And this is a disruptive innovation tool, if you would, for driving new behaviors.
If I could add one other thing, kind of put an exclamation point on this point. The short answer is the reason it hasn't been done is because it's really hard. And The comparison to what's been done in mapping Mars or the Moon is an interesting one, and I love having this dialogue with my NASA friends because my argument is our challenge is a lot harder. First of all, you can't communicate with radio frequencies. We're operating at up to 10,000 psi, often freezing, in a harsh chemical environment with no light. And when you think about some of those comparisons, putting something down and, if you will, simply mapping the bottom is hardly a simple challenge by any definition.
One other thing, if I could chip in, and that's that while we're focusing a lot of the conversation around the development of technology and new capabilities to enable some of the things that the prize wants to achieve, there's also sort of the safety exposure piece of this, and the fact, and that's one of the reasons why we went for a shore-based launch system that wouldn't put people, at risk in difficult seas, weather conditions that pop up that they might not be able to make it back to shore for, et cetera. So this is really also about the safe delivery of these technologies as well. I think that's an important point not to be overlooked.
I think we have another question from the chat.
Hi, I'm speaking on behalf of Jillian Kensley from Chemical and Engineering News, and she asks, or says, I wasn't able to attend the presentation. I just wanted to clarify something. The $7 million is targeted to imaging and mapping, and there's $1 million more from NOAA for chemical and biological sensors?
It's so the main prize is $6 million, and an additional $1 million, which then totals the $7 million, is the NOAA bonus prize.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions from reporters in the room?
I'm Dave Perlman from the San Francisco Chronicle. Could one of you tell me, list, if you can, the three most important unknowns as you see them now that this kind of mapping venture might clarify, might
Only three?
answer? What's unknown about the ocean bottom?
I'm going to offer one just because I'm the biologist here and I care about this. Somewhere between 60 and 90+% of marine species are unknown to science. That's the majority. So.
I'll offer another for you. Quite often when we go down into the deep sea, we come up with a new shipwreck or discovery. The San Jose just last week was announced off the coast of Colombia, pertaining about $17 billion of treasure on board. There is a UNESCO report that says there's an estimated 3 million shipwrecks on the seafloor. There's a huge insight into human history that we have yet to discover.
And I suppose I'd add from a geological standpoint, there are still, we know, large numbers of unmapped, uncharted volcanoes, rift zones, fracture zones, at a finer granularity than we currently see on the course maps that we've got.
That makes two big ones. Not counting the shipwrecks. What else is unknown? Basic unknown.
So another unknown is we see treatments and cures for diseases that come out of compounds in the ocean. So feeding back to the unknown biological species and creatures and sea life down there, we don't know what compounds are down there that can help us to address some of the medical issues that we have. For example, there's a Caribbean sponge that has a compound for AZT, which is a treatment used in AIDS. There's treatments and potential treatments for cancer, for Alzheimer's. So until we look down there, until we investigate what's out there, we don't know what we don't have access to.
In fact, the statistic I've used a lot is that half the anti-cancer drug discoveries now, more than half, come from marine organisms or chemistry. But let me add another unknown, and that unknown is a really good understanding of the ocean's contribution to the carbon cycle in terms of sources and sinks. So we talk about one potential detectable phenomenon being, say, methane seeps in the ocean. Well, those are they or are they not considerable carbon sources for the atmosphere. So being able to characterize the ocean's role in the carbon cycle is another major unknown.
Do you want one more? The other one are resources. There's more and more companies that are looking to mine the ocean floor for everything from rare earth metals to copper and other things. We don't know how much it is, or for that matter, where it is and how it relates to things like sensitive habitat. Right now, it is a classic unknown that can go one of two directions. Benefit to humanity, or pulling it out willy-nilly without any real understanding of where it's coming from or what it's doing.
I think we have another question from the chat.
Killian Kemsley with Chemical and why do I keep missing this? And Engineering News asks, does NOAA have particular goals for chemical sensors?
Yes.
Could you go into more depth?
Yeah. So our objective is to characterize basically the physical, chemical, and biological features of the ocean. So the major chemical constituents in the oceans, and as I indicated, some of the understanding of carbon chemistry, nutrient chemistry. I would add to that pollutant chemistry, because a lot of that chemistry is associated with things like oxygen, dead zones, minimum oxygen minimum zones, hypoxia in the ocean. So all of those variable chemical and biogeochemical constituents are part of our portfolio of interest, as it were.
She says thanks.
Are there any questions from reporters in the room?
Hi, Jens Haig from PLOS Blogs. Could you go into more depth about the biological side of the prize, and whether the sensing is simply biological compounds, or whether you're looking for indications of specific taxa and things that I'm an ecologist, so I'm interested in that sort of ecology side.
Yeah, so obviously we're in the process of defining that, and I would argue that given the structure of the prize, we're looking for something that has a certain degree of geographic specificity, if you will. So it's less about discovering a new species, as it were, compared to, for example, being able to detect the chemical signal from a whale fall, for example, on the ocean bottom, or the biological signal associated with coral spawning. Both of which, those latter two examples, could be detected, located, and identified in a geospatial context. And that's different from saying we've discovered a new species or a new component of the ecosystem, if you will.
Are there any other questions from reporters in the room? Are there any other questions from reporters on the chat? Oh.
Yeah, I mean, I assume you haven't chosen your survey zones yet. That was my impression. Can you just clarify for me the image rules of the competition? Are you going to place something in the zone that people will have to go video shoot, or is it something that will be in that? I'm just interested in how you're going to play the game, actually.
So some of those details we're still working out, but it could be something that we place down there, or it could be something that we already know the exact location and depth of, and so that may be what we specify for teams to find in that area.
Okay, any other questions? Any other questions from the chat? Nope. Thank you. That concludes our press conference for Xprize. Our next press conference will be at 4 o'clock, Plunging Below the Ionosphere. Thank you.
Cool.
I know.